you will have to use this. Yep. Testing 1, 2. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. It's good to see you. Let's go ahead and start with the word of prayer. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us not only to the beginning of this new day, but to the beginning of a brand new year. Pour out your Holy Spirit upon us and give us your wisdom and guidance to become the people you have created us to be, that all we would do would glorify you. Be with us now and bless our conversations, and bless your servant Mike as he speaks to us. May we hear you speaking through him today. Open up our hearts and our minds that we may hear your voice. All these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen. All right, come on in. So we are so blessed to have with us our very own Mike Nunnally. And some of you know that Mike has written a book. We've been advertising this for the past few weeks. And this book is a very personal and meaningful book to Mike about his spiritual journey. So Mike's going to come speak to us about that today. And then if you'd like to know more, or you'd like to actually get a copy of the book, Mike will have some copies available. If you're going to be here for the 10 o'clock service, we're going to ask that you go to the Janney Parlor for the coffee hour, and you'll have them there. But if you're not, and you've attended 745 and you'd like a book, please stick around and see Mike directly following the presentation today. So let's welcome Mike Nunnally. Thank you, Mike, for being here.
How about that? Is that better? I have to use the microphone because they're streaming. Normally I talk, as you guys know, if you know me, I talk loud enough. I don't need a microphone for sure. So I don't know who's monitoring the volume, but let me know if I talk too loud for that. So I'm happy to be here. Mike Nunnally is my name. I see most of the people here right now. I know you, and I know you well. A lot of you I know intimately. This young lady right here, for example, right here in the front row. Other names I go by, Chief, which I got later in life, Coach, which I got early on. And I'm looking here and I'm seeing Paige and Susan Moffitt, my dear friends from a long time ago. I believe Paige was the one who said, you know, you guys should go to St. James. Is that right? Oh, trying to give you some credit, Paige, all right? And you have to start reminding me. That's right. That's right, Marianne Avenue, absolutely. So let me start at the beginning of my life, which is what a memoir is about, at least mine is. Some memoirs start later, you know, in time or whatever. Mine actually starts when I'm 12, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life before that. I was born in Macon, Georgia, March the 22nd, 1944. So this young buck will be 80 years old in a couple of months. I lived not with my mother, very little with my mother when I was born. I was, quote, boarded out, which meant she paid money or my biological father paid money to have people watch me. My father left Monroe, Georgia, and my mother, when I was 3 years old, he moved to New Orleans. So, you know, there's a big connection there, obviously, for me. And he deserted our family, basically. So my sister was placed in a home for girls, an Episcopal home for girls. And my brother was in a Baptist home for boys for a while. Then he went, I think, and lived with my mother. But that's where my connection with the Episcopal Church started, was my sister. Because we all moved to Norfolk, Virginia when I was about 5 and a half. My sister was 13 years older. She was a senior in high school. My brother was 10 years older. I don't know how I happened, you know. Who knows? I mean, for a long time, you know, there was a question is, was my father my father? But as it turns out, I'm pretty sure that he was. So we moved to Norfolk, and everything was hunky-dory. My sister graduated. She got in a big fight with my stepfather. His name was Christopher Columbus Cheek. He was from Bedford, Virginia, and he was a mean person. He was a mentally sick person that I came to realize later on. So my sister left. A couple years later, my brother left, but my sister did one thing for me. She started taking me to an Episcopal church, Church of the Ascension in Norfolk, when I was 6 years old. And I continued to go there, even though my mother and stepfather, they never went to church, and would sometimes punish me by saying, well, you can't go. But most of the time I was able to go, and the priest there played a big part in my life. He took a shine to me. I loved to sing, and I was in their choir, and after choir practice or between services, he would have me come into his office, you know, give me a donut, orange juice while he had coffee or whatever. So things went bad after my brother and sister left. My stepfather had not lived with us, and then he moved into our apartment in Norfolk, and that's when, you know, things got bad. You'll read, you know, about it, but I was abused, chained. The police came to my house July the 7th, 1956. I was 12 years old. And I opened the door, and, you know, I'll talk about it here in my memoir. I opened the door, and I got a chain on my leg. And that's the last I saw that house. They took me out, and they took me down to where my mother was. She had a key, and my stepfather had a key. And they asked her, you know, how could you be a part of something like that? And I wrote about it. I have often thought about the question the detectives had angrily asked my mother. How could she be a part of chaining her son? Sometimes we go along in life and things get slowly out of hand. Before we know it, the situation has overwhelmed us. It's so hard to change course, and over time we accept the unthinkable as the norm. If we were able to see in the beginning where we would be in the end, there is no way we would have traveled that path. We've all had those circumstances in our life. For many of us, it's hard to extricate ourselves from a situation that has quietly overtaken our lives. We become comfortable with the way things are, even when we know in our hearts it is wrong. We find excuses and ways to justify our behavior, because to change would take a dramatic shift in our life's path, often accompanied by uncertainty and emotional pain. I think a lot of that is what happened with my mother. She let herself get caught in a situation that she couldn't control, and in the end, it cost her dearly. So after I was taken away from my parents, my mother, my stepfather, then I was placed in welfare, under the welfare system on a temporary basis while they tried to figure out what was going to happen. Luckily, the Episcopal priest knew about Boys Home of Virginia. A lot of you know that's where I grew up, but you don't know how I got there, and now you do. So he wrote to the director and he said, we got a boy here, he needs a home. Luckily, they had room for me. At first they didn't. The director said, well, we're full. Usually we have our placements done in the springtime. So I got lucky, I went to Boys Home. And I also was lucky with the people that I got placed with in Norfolk, a foster family called the Walkers. And there's a couple of good stories in here about the Walkers, and Burley Walker, who was a truck driver. I have trouble talking about him. Because he was a good man. So I went to Boys Home. I was 12 years old. Boys Home is in Covington, Virginia, which is 20 miles from the Greenbrier, White Sulphur Springs, and 20 miles from, Hot Springs up there. And it's in the middle of nowhere, basically. Allegheny Mountains, the homesteads up there in Hot Springs. And it was a mill town. I mean, Norfolk, Virginia was not a huge town, but Covington, Virginia was like tiny. But I didn't see much of Covington for a while. So I got to Boys Home, and Boys Home had about 90 boys when I was there. Right now, they're down to close to 40 for a number of reasons. We lived in a cottage, 15 boys, and you had a dorm room, the big boys' cottages I'll describe. You had a dorm room upstairs on one side and another dorm room on the other. 6 beds, 6 single beds on this side, 6 on the other. You had about that much space in between the beds. You had 2 drawers, a little place to hang your clothes. You had 1 bathroom with 3 sinks and 2 showers and a couple of urinals. And that was it. And you learned how to take care of yourself or you got run over. Now this is 1956. The world, as you know, is a lot different from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. When you're talking about 1956, that was a totally different world. Some of you were around during that time frame, and you know how much things have changed. What is called bullying now, that was the norm. If you were a guy and girl in some situations, you had to learn to take care of yourself. Because if you didn't, you got bullied. And I got bullied. I was used to being bullied. It was easy for me to fall back into that role. And when I first got to Boys Home, I was a mess. Outside, I was kind of like I am now, outgoing and fun, smiling, whatever, most of the time. But inside, I was a wreck. I sucked my thumb when no one was around. I sucked it at night. I was 12 years old. I wet the bed constantly. But after I got the boys home, I stopped sucking my thumb, and gradually I quit wetting the bed. And that was because of a house mother that I had. She did a great job with me. Anyway, I hated boys home at first because, like I said, I was getting picked on and all that. And then one day, I found out I had a good left jab. And I was never picked on again because I bloodied some guy's nose. And what I found out was that, and this goes with whether someone is trying to bully someone else emotionally or physically or, any other way, if you fight back, they will leave you alone. The bully wants to pick on somebody who's not going to fight back. Even if you get, like you get beat in a fight, doesn't matter. People don't even fight anymore, do they? I don't know what's going on. So anyway, I ran away, a couple times, hitchhiked. No one hitchhikes anymore because everyone is afraid. And it really is a shame, really, because when I was at boys' home, the way we got to town, which was 3 miles away, we had to walk 3/4 of a mile down a hill to Route 60 when we were in high school, and we hitchhiked to town. And we hitchhiked back. And that's, there were a lot of other things like that where you learned how to take care of yourself, how to function. And at Boys Home, we learned how to be brothers. I just went back recently for an alumni association meeting, and I talked a little bit and spoke about my book and my time at Boys Home. And I say that Boys Home saved my life. And they did. Because they taught me how to be a man. Not in the easy ways necessarily, but, and I was, one thing that really helped me out is I was a good athlete. I was a natural athlete, and Boys Home, we were the underdogs. That's the way we looked at ourselves. And so when you're an underdog, you band together. And athletics was our way of showing everybody, hey, look at me. I'm somebody. So that's what we did. I graduated from high school, and I decided I wanted to keep playing basketball and baseball, so I went to college. And that's why I went to college. Sports, basketball played a big part in my life, all through my life. So I went to Bridgewater College, and it was in my memoir page, when I get to 9:40 or 8, whatever it is, tap your watch like, what's his name used to do at 7:45? Frank Myers. Tap your watch and let me know, because I don't want to go overtime. So I got to Bridgewater, but I had a plan. Boys Home taught me a lot of things. They taught me, number one, how to be a part of a team. They taught me to work hard, and I mean physically, work hard. And, I found out early my first year in the fall, my hand fit a rake perfectly because we took care of the grounds. We took care of everything up there, cleaned it all that. So that's one thing they did teach me, and how to play sports, et cetera, et cetera. And I had a coach up there named Paul Seipel, who in my memoir, I called him my Marlboro man. You remember Marlboro cigarettes, right? When they used to be advertised, and the Marlboro man was always on a horse, had the cowboy hat on, he was the man, quiet, strong, silent type. Well, that was my coach, Paul Seipel. And he was my Marlboro man. Whatever he said, that was gospel. So I get to college, and I had I'm going to play basketball and baseball. I knew I was good enough to play there. It's a small Division III college, Bridgewater. But I didn't have the support system that I had at Boys Home. I didn't have anybody making me do, what I needed to do. And I lived in a very structured environment. I mean, we moved on the bell. We ate on the bell. We went to sleep on the bell. We went to school on the bell. We worked on the bell. Everything was like that. Well, you're used to that for 7 years, and then you go off and there's no bell. And, you meet different kinds of people who are not used to, the kind of life you lived in, and they're like, hey, let's go do this, let's go do that. And I'm like, hell yeah. Let's go do that. That sounds like fun. Because, at Boys Home, there was, you couldn't drink. You could smoke, believe it or not, in the basement of your cottage if you were a high schooler. But you couldn't drink, you weren't able to get away with a lot of stuff the townies were, okay? So I get to Bridgewater, I was like, hey, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, and I'm not going to study. And the first year and a half, I barely scraped by enough to stay eligible. Then I got into a tiff with one of my coaches, and he said, well, you can't play. Well, that was the end of it. So, I mean, middle of my junior year, I didn't even go back for exams. And after I left, at 2.5 years, I had a 1.585 on a 4.0 scale. And if you know bonehead math, you know that's not very good. So I went back and hung out with the Walkers in Norfolk, got a manual job, $1.25 an hour, manual labor. And, but I was worried. Okay, now what was I worried about in 1966? I was worried, that's right, I was worried about being drafted. I wasn't worried about being drafted. I was worried about going to Vietnam. And so I enlisted. Well, if you enlist, you only have to go for 2 years. You go for 3 years instead of 2 if you're drafted. But if you're enlisted and you can pass a test, you get to pick what job you want to be. Well, my job was not going to be an infantryman. So I became a clerk because I knew how to type a little bit from high school. So I did go to Vietnam, as a matter of fact. But luckily, I saw no action. My time, as I described in my memoir in Vietnam, was more like MASH. Remember the series MASH? That was my time in Vietnam. We did have one situation where I had to go out on night ambush patrol because our commanding officer said everyone's got to be put in harm's way. So when I got there, they trained me for 5 minutes on an M60 machine gun, and literally maybe 10 minutes. So it came time to go out. We go out at night, and we set up this L-shaped ambush around a known Charlie, where they would come at night, but they never saw anything there. All of a sudden, about 1 a.m., and my eyes were like this big around when I got there. People next to me are sleeping. I look down and the guy's asleep. My eyes are like this. I'm looking around, scared to death. All of a sudden, someone fires a shot, and a few more shots were fired, and they had these tracer bullets, so every 5th round was like a red bullet where you could see where everyone was firing to. Like 30 seconds, everybody's letting loose on this same spot. And I squeezed off a couple on my M60, and I went, oh no, I can't do that. Because the guy who trained me on it, he said, let me tell you something, never fire this weapon. That's what he told me. He said, never fire this weapon. I'm like, why not? He said, because that's where Charlie's coming first. He's coming after this machine gun. So I squeezed off a couple, I was like, whoa. That's the end of that. So that was my combat in Vietnam. And I came back. The Army really helped me. It helped me in a number of ways. It helped me focus a little bit more. And I mean, I had no problem getting along with people in the Army. I was used to that, a bunch of guys talking crap and, trying to beat each other up or play basketball, whatever it was. I got along great there. But it did help me get more focused. And I came back, finished it. Luckily, they took me back at Bridgewater. I have no idea why. Made the dean's list. I got a graduate assistantship to Madison College, which is now JMU, where I was teaching freshman students PE while I was going to grad school. Meanwhile, I'm just having a great time. I didn't mention a whole lot of that in my book because some of it's just not proper. But we all live and live our lives and do things we're not totally respectable, that we don't want to repeat to other folks. So that part I kept to myself. I wanted it to be a PG book. So anyway, now I'm in grad school, and what am I going to do next? I never thought that much ahead in my life. It was like, hey, I'll just do this or I'll do that, and whatever comes, I can handle it. And one reason is, even when I was young, I always felt like God was protecting me. I felt like I was in some amniotic fluid in a sack that no matter what happened, I could get by. And I did. And I did get by. So I was over playing basketball at Bridgewater College gym during the summer. I was getting ready to graduate. And there was a guy named Jerry Hannes. He was a basketball coach over here at James Wood in Winchester. He said, hey, Nuttling, what are you doing? You got a job yet? I said, nope. He said, well, I know someone up in Loudoun County, Loudoun Valley High School. They're looking for a football coach, an assistant coach. So I said, okay. I never played football. Played like 1 year. I was like, this is not for me. Too thin, and I'm not that tough. So came up here, and I interviewed and ended up here in 1971 at Blue Ridge Middle School. That was the first year the middle schools were open in Loudoun County. Blue Ridge, J. Lupton Simpson here in Leesburg, and then Sterling Middle School. And I did coach football, but I've got to read you this little bit. How am I doing, Paige? What time we got? All right, good, perfect. So I get to Loudoun County. I don't know. I'm a loner. All right, I love people, but I love to be alone. I treasure my own company. That old song, I forget what it is. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble. Anyway, he's like, he treasures his own company. So I don't have any problem sitting among a bunch of people just watching. So this is chapter 36, a bolt out of the blue. It was the first day of new teacher orientation for Loudoun County Public Schools. Loudoun County was growing, and in 1971, the first middle schools were open. Sterling Middle School in the eastern, J. Lupton, and Blue Ridge in the western end of the county. So many young, excited teachers in the brand spanking new auditorium of J. Lupton Simpson Middle School. I didn't know a soul, and being a lone wolf, I settled into a seat by myself in the middle of the auditorium, just people watching, before the orientation was to begin. I heard some excited talking and laughing behind me, and I turned around, and there she was. A tall, thin, beautiful young woman wearing a long hippie-type dress She had long brown hair with 2 stripes going around. Anyway, I watched her the rest of that day and for many years after that. And come to find out, she was also at Blue Ridge Middle School. And so we got married, had some great times together, still have great times together. We still love each other. And our kids, all I wanted to be was a good parent. And we did it. We started coming to St. James in 1980, and we wanted to get our son baptized here. He was born in 77, Pete. He's an Episcopal priest, as most of you know. And the rector here, Jack Smith, later John, he refused to baptize our son. He said, "You don't go to St. James." And we wanted to have him baptized here because I had an affiliation, but we weren't going to church at the time. And so we started coming to St. James. And 4 years later, and our daughter was baptized here, and 4 years later, the best thing that ever happened to us and to me was when John Smith said, "You know, there's an opening at St. George's Camp. They need a director." And I didn't know anything about St. George's Camp. I knew where it was because I was on the vestry, and we had gone up for the vestry retreat in the fall. So St. George's Camp, here we come. And 9 summers we spent up there, and I learned so much from my staff, from the campers. That's when I rounded out. And, you know, we've been active here at St. James. Now, I haven't been to St. James that much lately. I lived in New Orleans for 3 years, in Richmond for a year, and then I came back up here, and my son was at St. Mary's as assistant, and he started Wilderness Church. Maybe you've seen some of that on Facebook, where he would lead a church service. He was part of St. Mary's Arlington, where he would lead a church service outside, which is amazing. You know, my son Pete, he's a Pied Piper. Everybody loves Pete. Plays the guitar, sings. He's a holy man in a different way. In a different way. You're talking to Pete, you're the only person in the room. You know, he doesn't look around. He's totally focused on you, which is a gift. So, and I was going to St. Timothy's, where Brooke goes, in Herndon, in the Episcopal Church. Charles Cowherd is a priest there. Well, Charles was a camper when I was director, was a counselor with Brooke, so, you know, they go there. So now I'm starting to get back, settle more back into my home. And I'm going to take some questions, a couple. How much time, Paige? 5 minutes? All right. I'll take a couple of, any questions? Perfect. All right, so I'm going to show you some pictures. Just briefly, I have put in here just in case, so let's see what happens. That's the kid right there. That's when I was 12 years old, living in Norfolk. We used to go walking on the sand dunes near Fort Story, down near Virginia Beach. That's my Moses picture. years, they took my picture. I remember that. And I never saw it. I just remember they took a picture. I never saw that article. Pete and I went back last December. I had heard about that there might be something in the paper, or thought there might be. We went to the Library of Congress, and we found that. And I was like, I mean, that's the cover, all right? So, things got better after that.
Why was your stepfather arrested?
I'm sorry?
Why was your stepfather arrested and not your mother and stepfather?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. But my mother never was abusive like that. She just allowed it to happen. So I think that's a good question. Thank you. Yeah, I remember they told me, put your hand over your face. Of course, something like that would never be allowed. You put the paper in this day and age, a 12-year-old kid. There's Frank Rose. He's a priest. He was the priest at Church of the Ascension. There's Boys Home. That's where Boys Home is still there. They're still serving boys. They still do a great job. I've stayed in touch with them all through the years. Been on their board, etc. We used to donate money to Boys Home, and I'm hopeful that we will start doing that again, at least in some way or another. See, I don't have a pointer. Do you see the guy with the spit curl up there on the second row? See the blood? That was my first basketball team. Those are my hot pockets. You know. My only year of football. I think you can pick me out probably. That's the chapel at Boys Home where I was baptized when I was 13, so that was my first year. That's my sister, Seal, and her husband, Herb. Seal was my biggest fan for my memoir. I told her I was writing a memoir. I sent her some things. If I didn't text her something every day, she would text me back and say, more pages. She passed at 93, just on Thanksgiving. Be a good one. There's my inaugural man on the left, Paul Seibel, and on the right is Bob Burrows, who was the director of Boys Home when I got there. The other man was the assistant director. And Paul and Bob Burrows, they were great men. Number 41 on your scorecard, number 1 in your hearts. That team was 17-1. The only game we lost was to a Bridgewater College JV team. When I was a senior, we had a lot of good athletes on that team. Scholarship football player. 45 was a pitcher on the baseball team, was our best pitcher. He signed a pro contract. There we go. Legs. Come on. I played first base and pitched. That's my freshman college picture. I started peroxide in my hair a little bit. On the left there, that's my college coach. On the right, Coach Seibel. Working on the hook shot. That's me, my freshman year, and right behind me is my first wife, Pat Close. She was a PE major from Baltimore and a really good basketball player. And that was a big mistake for both of us when we eloped. I was in the Army. So. Chug-a-lug, chug-a-lug. That was varsity initiation or something like that. That's my brother Howard on the right. He passed at 85 right when COVID hit. He got COVID. Whoop. coaching SP on the pitching machine. That's my daughter, Brooke. There we are, Camp. Pete's got his hands. They're both, yeah. Team Nola, we took a bunch of mission trips down to New Orleans. That was one of our group. Our motto, work hard, play hard. That's when my daughter got married. Yeah, that's me. And I went back just before COVID, 2 years before COVID, I went back to Boys Home. As probably the oldest coach, high school coach in Virginia at age 75, and coached the basketball team for 2 years. And then COVID hit and we got shut down. So, I'll be here afterwards if anyone, oh, I forgot about the mic, sorry. Sorry, Dr. Ed Hattrick, sorry. I'll be here after this, and I'll also be over in the Janney Parlor. If you have any questions, I do have some books for sale and signing. If anyone brought their book, I know some people have a book already. I'll be over there after the 10 o'clock service. Yes, ma'am. I didn't hear, I heard the thank you. I didn't hear anything else. That would be a great idea. If you get in touch with me, we can work something out for sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming, folks.